Good morning. Just another 15 minutes or so before Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge 2 gets started. Got plenty of time. Brew that coffee, make some tea, have plenty of pencils and pens. Get ready. Session 1 starts about 10 a.m. Let's go. Good morning. Just a little microphone check. All systems are go. Getting ready for Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge 2. Coming right up. 10 a.m. top of the hour here live from Chicago. Let's go. Good morning, good morning. 9 more minutes to start Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge 2 for the live from Chicago. Coming right up. Just 5 more minutes for the Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge. Session 1. About to get started. Drink that coffee. Let's go. A couple more minutes, letting everyone join in from wherever they are. If you can hear my voice, say yes, sounds good. You can hear that music. You're gonna get used to that music. It's gonna become your new favorite song, like it is for me. Yes. Let's go about 2 more minutes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for waking up, joining me here. I'm about to get started for Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge 2. This is, of course, session 1. Yes. So welcome in, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. And those of you who are catching it live, great. Thanks for getting up, being here. We are, of course, broadcasting live from Chicago at Pastry Virtuosity headquarters, which is my home here in Lincoln Park. And as you know, many of you had some questions about what this is. This is the second round of the pastry challenge, and we've doubled the amount of registrants and attendees and people who want to check it out. So whether you're here to check out all 5 sessions you're in to do it and get the most out of it, or you're here just checking out the first one to see if it's something that works for you on a single pass, welcome. I think for the second time, it's amazing to me that we were able to accomplish what we did. It was 6 weeks ago today almost where we did the first one. And, those brave chefs that signed up didn't necessarily know 100% what we're doing, but the trust in themselves, the trust in me to bring something of value. And I promise I won't disappoint you. I wanted to let you know we have a couple sponsors, so I want to get that broadcast and taken care of. And some of you are able to benefit because of their contributions. So Vos Chocolates, Prodotti Stella, Gelato Ingredients, IFI Gourmet, Chef Rubber, Nielsen Massey Vanilla, Blommer Chocolate here locally, John Corner and Company, and also Barry Calabo. So thank you to all of them. Big thank you for always supporting the pastry industry, the pastry scene, regionally and across country and worldwide. So I want to tell you before we get started the why for me that I'm doing this, the why that led to the Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge, why I even do it, why I even have these things. So, as many of you know, it's been a tough year, as we all know, and it's kind of touched us all in different ways. And I have had the misfortune and, the fortune. I've avoided a lot of misfortune and had the benefit of being blessed to have work throughout. And this isn't the first time we've had hardship where, you know, things haven't been great with the economy and things have not been great in pastry. In fact, we kind of saw sort of a steady decline over the years in the pastry chef world in terms of earning power, in terms of how many jobs are out there for us. And I think it's not where we thought it would be a few years back, where we really saw all this cool creative people and an opportunity in the United States for pastry to blow up. And while it is better now, it is lacking in some ways. So here I am doing really well, have had the fortune to work in luxury hotels is pretty much my background, fine dining. And at some point, I was lured away into other things by some pretty enlightened people in the retail sector. So I was brought into retail grocery, a place where I do not belong whatsoever. I was asked by Bob Mariano, who at the time they had about 38 stores of amazing retail grocery that was based on theater and change and creating a really exciting environment for shoppers. And that'll become important as we get into kind of the whys of your businesses and your personal motivations. But his motivation, his why, was to reinvent grocery. That brought me into another world where, and we see some of this world in pastry, in the fine dining too, and in the places that we work, whether we're in a chocolate company, we own our own bakery, or we have a bakery related business. We see that industry, chocolate, gelato ingredients, dairy ingredients, non-dairy ingredients, other commodities. These all contribute to our field, and the high-end pastry chef is really the couture for the field, just with the sizzle, put the sizzle on it. And below that is a lot of business and industry that feeds into retail. So I was able to really continue to connect the dots between the retail side, the food service side, which, as you know now, is almost it's done, right? There's not much there. A couple businesses doing good, and then the distributors that kind of provide those services. And everybody's been challenged to change and pivot in different ways, but yet some people still seem to do well. They still seem to do well no matter what. And why is that? So I wanted to examine it, and I thought, if I'm doing good and I knew somebody who had some insight and some value and had, the secrets, if you would, or the insight. It's not really a secret, it's the insight. If you don't know, it feels like a secret, but it's really just experience, education, insight, and track record and confidence in those things that you know. I felt if I knew someone that had those that wouldn't share with me, I'd be kind of mad at them, right? I'd be like, hey, why don't you telling me these things? And so I wanted to share those things. I wanted to share my personal mission I have is to help pastry chefs and pastry businesses, pastry related businesses. On the business side, that's been really good. We've been working with a lot of manufacturers. We've been working in a couple of different industries in the sectors that are doing really well. But I wanted to do something to give back to the pastry chefs, to my people. I mean, I feel like I know you, I know us better than I know myself, or better than I know many things. I know what makes us tick. I know that pastry chefs are probably, to me, the most amazing people on the planet. They do so much so well. And I think I wanted to give and serve that community. So that's the reason I'm here. Hopefully, you'll get the most out of it. Like most things in life, you get out of it what you put into it. So when you take a class, I mean, I took a lot of pastry classes. I'd have to say, you guys have taken a lot of pastry classes. There's some real heavy hitters watching this. There are people maybe just starting out in their pastry career, but there are many of us have been here for a while and can share experiences. One experience I wanted to share with you is I had the benefit of traveling to Issenju, France, a few years back. And at that time, Stéphane Trian still lived in France. He was the captain of the French national pastry team, and he was going to teach us showpieces, entremet, lots of good stuff. We were staying in a castle. It was really creepy. Shout out to October. It's the Halloween month. It was creepy like that. It was chains rattling. I don't think anyone slept, jet lag and whatnot. But we did work, those classes are also work. We're doing 14, 15 hours of class every day. And I was traveling with the first American pastry chefs to ever be at the National Superior Pastry School. And we were in there and we are listening to Chef Triand and many of the people that I was traveling with. They stood in the back and they didn't really listen. And Trian's sort of soft spoken. He's an excellent teacher, but he didn't do what I would probably do and say, "Hey, cut it out if you're not good, you're not willing to participate. Get out, right? Go back to the castle and go back home." But instead, he was very patient and allowed them to kind of carry on. And many of them, things would come up and they would say, "That's not going to work in the United States. That's not working in my city and my property," or they would just, not really participate in the activity and half-heartedly. To me, what was for me one of the best experiences of my career, I think for them was probably just some, time to drink espresso and go back home and a little vacation. That's okay too, but they didn't get much out of it. So, what you put into this is what you'll get out of it. I can say that the last round of chefs, the response was incredible, and they did the work, and they are continuing on to do things today. In fact, those 5 weeks they go fast. So if you're catching this on replay, you can watch it again and again. If you're catching this live, pause, fast forward as you go through the workbook, but make sure you do the workbook. And then remember to reach out to me on some platform. I'm pretty easy to find, and book your 30-minute phone calls for the week. Do the homework first, book the call, let's have the call, can explain things. The first week, this week, is probably the hardest just to get started, and you'll see when we jump in a couple moments here. But after that, you've set your path, it gets much easier. This 5 weeks will cover everything from where you were, where you want to be, the pivot, some of the possibilities, identifying some things you thought were out of reach. And I'll show you how to do that, how to get there, and how to move forward. So, after all that, thank you, and let's jump in. First of all, a little map of where we're headed. Session one, expansion intro, your why and golden circle training, which we'll do first just to get us started on our path, and then we'll look at a trajectory map, workbook activity where we look at location and destination and what is a trajectory. Then elements of identity. Identity is so important, as you'll find out, and often those things are set way back, and we're still kind of operating under this identity. And identity is important to a chef, and perhaps some work here will pay dividends. Elements of style, a little bit examination, and maybe expanding on the range of our style and what's appropriate in the marketplace today. And then the pivot, a little bit of potentials and possibilities on how we could pivot, how we can identify a pivot, and how we can go for it. Sharing your story. This is really sharing your story with you and sharing your story in a way that you could broadcast it later and share with others. And then some good take home work about new ideas, methods for expression, designing for the new era, and lots of things that are going on today that will give us energy and momentum to kind of move toward our pivot or continue to be able to rebrand and reassess where we're at. So, the golden circle here, if you can look, you have a little bit on the left, a circle, and this is the golden circle itself on the left side. This is made and kind of put together by Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek, if you don't know, he is a writer and speaker, and he works a lot with different businesses on some of the subjects we're going to bring up. So I thought a great place to start. If you look on the outside of the circle, I've covered up a little bit here with my screen, but that's the what, and it's what you do. We're looking at this as yourself. As a pastry chef, your identity of yourself, your pastry, your business is all really close. And I think for the purposes of these exercises, it's the same thing, right? You're a walking commodity, you're a walking brand, your own universe, and you can define it as a result. So if it's set with limitations, those are things you define and you can smash through them. If it's expanding and you build it so that it can always be flexible, then it will always be flexible. So in this golden circle, we have the what, how, and why. But the statement that we want to concentrate on is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. They don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So the what is the actuality. I make desserts, I produce chocolate bars, I'm a consultant for business companies. That's what you do, and a lot of people can say that they do those same things. The how is a means that we get there. I make them, by hand, I make them by machine, I make them with ancient recipes, I make them with recipes passed down from grandma. Those are some hows, and the whys to motivation. But often we get it backwards where we're really saying what we are, we're advertising what we are, we're trying to publicize that. And that just puts you on a comparison basis with other people that do what you do or do similar, and people will make their decisions. But the why, that internal reason, that reason you get up in the morning, you get out of bed and can't wait to make pastry. I know every one of us got into this field because it's exciting. So to me, the most exciting thing I've ever seen. I was in the music business previously. I did work in restaurants. I was cooking. But when I saw what was possible in pastry, it just blew my mind, right? Your brain turns around and you're like, this is the best shit ever, excuse me. And I really can't imagine doing something else. But instead, over time, the industry can just kind of beat that out of you a little bit. So that why needs to be reassessed sometimes. This why, that motivation. Again, my why is making an impact, transforming pastry chefs and sweet businesses, one person, one chef, one product, one project at a time. And how I do that and what I do will vary from client to client to business to activity to activity. And here's why that's important. On the right side, you have our brain, and it kind of correlates directly to the golden circle. If you look on the outside of our brain is the neocortex, right? Uh, that's our kind of new brain. That's the brain that we have now that can do so many great complicated things and can understand and calculate and figure things out. This is modern man, right? We have more information than we even know what to do with anymore. We can plan, we have tools to track it, and we know how to do that. That's all in our neocortex, but there's no emotions there. All those emotions, all those gut feelings, all those intuitions and nuances, those kind of are the result of our limbic brain activity. That's our ancient brain, if you will. The limbic brain doesn't really have the means to express in words things like the neocortex does, but it is responsible for 100% of our decision making. So get that. Our limbic brain, which can't communicate in the ways of the what and the how, really just responds to that why, that emotional response, that it feels right, it's the right thing to do, that it makes sense. It just makes sense. I want to do it. I got that gut feeling. This is how we want to appeal to others. And we can do that by close examination of our why, and really kind of getting into reevaluating that and then setting some trajectory for that. So I hope that makes some sense. We'll get into that after we look at some archetypes. And an archetype, this is a good way and a fun way you see here. We have a nice CMO network contributed characters that we all may know and love, archetypes that can help us understand what our why might be. Are we protectors whose purpose is to protect what's important? I'm going to be the archivalist for pastry. Is it the liberator or the designer? And we have lots of designers in pastry. We're all designers on some level. Or the guide, helping others. I'm a teacher. Or the advocate, a challenger. Look at some of these, the unifier, the master, on a mission to change lives. So does pastry change lives? I think it can. It's changed my life. So those things are possible. Thinking of those archetypes, and now we look at a trajectory map. which seems simple. It's just some circles, some circles on a page that we're about to fill in. But a trajectory is important because, we have a lot of paths in pastry. And a path is just like a straight line to something. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that in my career. And then I'm going to get there. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get this job, work for the best chefs. Then eventually I'll have my own place. I'm going to go through it like that. But there's really no notion of time. Like we can hope I'm going to work, a year or two here, a year there, but we really don't know. Whereas a trajectory, it comprises the path and a schedule for getting there. So it's sort of not a straight line. It can kind of emanate, and our trajectory can adjust when we get there. If I'm headed in the right direction, I know when things change and conditions change, I'll be able to make some adjustment. I'm not just like, well, that wasn't in the plan. As we know, again, the plans sometimes go out the window as we've seen. So your why would go in that center circle, and then I want to have you start considering what points on the circle, and I'll pull up here another map that can kind of illustrate what we're gonna head where we're gonna head to. So this is the map. I'm gonna pull myself out of here, and you can see your Y is in the center. So we'll start considering that by the end of today. What's that Y? The Y um, based on an archetype or something else, but make sure your why isn't to be successful for the business I work in today that I don't own. I love this business I work for. It's giving me a great opportunity. I want to take care of their guests. That's really not your why. Like, what is your why? What makes you tick? What it makes you the most happy to do pastry or something related to pastry or something unrelated, even if you're looking to transition into other areas. And once we have that why, we can start to fill in these circles that you see. Don't worry about the arrows for right now, that comes later, but these circles are sort of little directions and posts on the path of emanation, and you can kind of spread them out however. Maybe something that's further away, something further away might be, one of those circles on the outside, something like I want to start my own food styling business. I'm not doing that right now. I know that comes later, so I'm going to put that a little further out. But some other things in terms of, posting more on social and broadcasting my new why, my new identity that I'll shortly have, or those identities that I know now that I have. You can put those closer, and you start to see those things that are important to you, and only focus on those. There's so many things that will come up in your workday that you have to focus on. You don't get a choice to focus on, but those will come up anyway. These things are things you want to focus on. I want to be on TV. I want to do a little bit more with food science. I want to work in other ways toward those bigger goals. So if that makes some sense, this is the area I can say last round took the most to wrap our brains around in terms of, what is our why to begin with? For your why, you don't want to be too broad where it doesn't really have any appeal to others, and you may lose track of it. You might know, but you want to be able to write it down, communicate it, and build on it. And if it's too specific, then a lot of things, good things can come your way, but you're like not focused on that. So the best why is broad enough to open up for other opportunities, but narrow enough where and specific enough where it's your niche, where we say you can niche down to a niche so small that only you could fit into it. Well, there's a lot of yous out there. You just don't know all the time how many. And once you start broadcasting that niche, you'll attract them. So let's look at identity for a moment and talk about that. If you know me at all, I like a good word cloud these days, something that is fun and visual. But if you think about it, baked into our identity, cupcakes and tarts, these are all the things that we make, right? I mean, is that really our identity? I mean, they say you are what you eat, right? But that's not really our pastry chef identity. Again, those are whats. Those are things we do um, making money, that's a result. That's not a why. Our identity, though, will point to that why pretty clearly. So I want you to think about, when did you decide the elements of the identity that you have now? And let's talk about it in pastry terms. As a pastry chef, when did you decide that this was your style, or these are the things that I wanted to make up my style, or I had to be a fine dining chef, or I really want to work in grocery? No, let's face it, none of us said, hey, I really want to work in retail grocery. But yet, right now, that's where the revenue is. So if our why, let's say restaurants never came back, or all the restaurants closed for good. Probably won't happen. I hope it doesn't happen. Let's say for a moment all the restaurants closed for good. Are we able to then pick up with our talents, all these amazing, cool individuals that you are with all this experience, and go somewhere? Or are we just sort of dead in the water and have to consider, telemarketing? Then there's no telemarketing, right? What are we going to do? So, all joking aside, I was one of those chefs. I was still kind of identify with that part of me. I was a fine dining chef. I was working in Michelin restaurants. I was working in that style of restaurant before Michelin even came to the US. And I thought that was the pinnacle of artistry. Plate of dessert to me is the pinnacle of artistry in our field, because it involves everything: decoration, planning, design, reveal, a little theater, just everything, the sourcing ingredient. There's so much that goes into it. I love it. But we know that the most lucrative, the most happening business environments aren't necessarily fine dining restaurants. No one wants to sit for 3.5 hours to eat anymore, hardly. Maybe once a year, twice a year. The cost of those meals is high. The profitability lacks for the business. The desire for an individual, a chef, when she continues on or he continues on to do that for 10, 15 years, kind of goes away, because they lose momentum. So we don't want that to happen to any of you. And I can say that hasn't happened to me, but I still get to do many of those things. I just have much more control over it. So in your identity, for me, it was saying, what's my version of success? Don't worry about what other people's version of what a pastry chef is. How are we going to grow this industry if we don't become innovative, if we don't become thought leaders, if we're not on the leading edge? This show, this session, this initiative, Pastry Chef Expansion Challenge, it is for thought leaders like you. The fact that you're even here, it really speaks volumes of what your dedication is to you, and that there's a need to get to that other place. And so, thinking about that identity and being able to say, hey, I decided some of the stuff when I was a kid, even before culinary school. I don't have to be attached to it, and it's okay, because my new identity is going to speak more to me. I feel comfortable in my own skin doing the things I want to do, excited to get up in the morning to do pastry in the way that I want to do pastry, and finding like-minded individuals who uh, who want to do the same thing, who want to support me at doing my thing. That is the result of this hard work. That is the result of identifying your whys. So that's the things to think about. I'm going to take a little break and jump into a little another subject of visualization, which we'll visit later in the sessions. As far as the sessions go, session 1, this is our why, those things that we're talking about now, the identity. But then as we get into 2 and 3, there's some solid goal setting and really refreshing and revamping all those platforms that we can put out. And a lot of that has to do with social media and other means, as well as getting into some video editing and things. And then a little bit of health and wellness and how to kind of keep that energy, kind of have that energy when you get there. We're going to do all that hard work, and we're going to figure this all out in a better way than we have before. We did pretty good before. Now we're going to do great, but then when we get there, we can't be tired for it, right? We got to show up for our own life. So all those things are where we're headed with these sessions. So right now, I just want to do a short visualization on a plated dessert. or really what this should be is a visualization on a to-go container. But I want to use this container instead. This is something I like, something recent from Chef Forward Company. They do some cool stuff. Check them out. And basically, instead of making a dessert the way that I've done a dessert in the past, I don't do that. I don't want to do that. And so whether it's a dessert of any kind, chocolate bar, or even like a program that you want to do, here's the visualization. I want you guys to, you can do this now. If you have a plate, hold up your coffee mug. It's a good chance to drink a little bit of tea. Oh yeah, Earl Grey, my favorite. All right, and then we have our plate. And I just close my eyes and I picture in that to-go container, that plate, what it is that would excite me when it comes to the table, what it is that no one's ever seen before, that I got it, I would be just over the moon. I mean, that seems simple, right? Kind of silly. You're like, hey, I tuned in. We were talking about all this stuff in neocortex and whatnot, and now we're staring at blank plates. But the key is to start visualizing things, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Every morning, I start with visualization involves the success of the projects that I'm working on or future projects that I want to see materialize. And yeah, I know it sounds like a little crazy, a little woo woo, as Julie would say. But for me, I'm interested in results. So if all I have to do is visualize every day for 5 minutes and I see results, well, I'm going to keep doing that, right? Like, I would be foolish to just say, well, it's kind of weird. I mean, no one has to see you do any of this, right? You got to see me do that, but no one has to see you do that. So it's important. It's not really about anything except honing in on the stuff that's exciting. And if you look at too much online photos of desserts, and if you look at too much of what you did in the past, you become really derivative. I worked with one chef who was a great chef. He was amazing at one or two areas of our field. And we know, being a pastry chef, it's a deep field, man. There's a lot. There's so much to learn, and you got to go from one thing to another. If you go too quickly, you're not good at anything. If you stay in one area, you know, some businesses won't hire you for everything, right? Because you focus. So it's something you'll hear a lot, right? Some of your mentors will say, "Do everything, be good at everything, so you're flexible." It's good advice. Some mentors would tell me, "Be great at one thing." Well, sugar showpieces was one of my one things at one point, and that's not really great for business. I can't make a sugar showpiece or teach a class and say, all right, guys, go out there and buy that 25-pound bag of sugar and get going, right? It's not really helpful, although sugar showpieces are amazing and beautiful. But to the point, we want to be able to visualize. We want to be able to view things and not be distracted by what others are doing, not be distracted. We're going to be aware of it, and after we have our whys solid, we're going to talk about checking out the competition and what we can do better to add value to the marketplace. But those things are important. So visualize later some cool to go food, something grab and go, something that's very now, and kind of see where you end up. Let's talk about pivots next. How do I pivot? How do I pivot? There's so many areas of the pastry field that, as I mentioned earlier, I might have felt, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work in retail grocery, right? It's not for me. But I need to go somewhere, right? I need to plan out something. So I worked in retail grocery, but I was at a high level. I worked in the trenches making cakes in the grocery store. It was really interesting to me. I had no, well, a couple. Some of the cake decorators had some schooling, but the most part, we know that we've got all this uh, shopping and money and revenue in grocery, and the in-store bakeries, the food's just not very good. And I always wanted to know why. When I interviewed for that job to be the director of bakery operations for what ended up being 50 stores, I remember they were assembling this chef team of experts, and I walked into the back of one of these beautiful stores that has all these outlets and actually had bakery on two levels and super brand new. Everything was beautiful. The cases were lit. Wow, everything looked good. And I walked in the back room, and There was no food, there was no mixers, there was nothing back there. There was nothing at all. I thought, okay, so I see what we're dealing with here. Maybe I can bring some of that. And there were some visionaries there that said, hey, we want to revolutionize retail grocery. So being involved in that, I knew it was a bad place for me, right? I don't belong. But I knew it wouldn't last, right? And at some time, you don't want things to last because you're like, this is so hard. However, I was able to bring in a lot of my partners and friends and contacts from the fine dining and from the food service world to kind of contribute to that goal. So I'm convinced at some point we're going to have great grocery stores, right? Where there'll be the kind of pastries that you and I make, but figuring that out, takes, it's not one person to do that. It's the way that the population moves that we don't control, right? So on the things we do control, we need to be able to pivot to. So on those pivots, we kind of tend to gravitate toward the top. If this chart, it's a great chart from the Academy de Cuisine, being a pastry chef, being a chef owner, still do those things, guys. Those are great, but recipe testing, where are we with food technology? If you haven't checked out IFT and what they're doing lately, really cool stuff, and bringing more and more individuals with our background into that world, because let's face it, customers now, the consumer for grocery, the consumer for restaurants, the consumer for bakeries is much more educated than they have ever been because of the internet. So they look at things, they read labels, they're often, and as a result, they're much more educated than the people servicing them sometimes, and becomes difficult to service them. So, as a pastry chef, we might know and have that information, but the frontline servers, the cashiers, all these people in the business that are closest in contact, is kind of backward, right? The people who touch the guests, consumer, customer, client the most often isn't the person with all the answers. And sometimes we ask them to wait, or we risk having a junior player just kind of make something up that's not accurate. And they know, guys, that it's not right. So being informed and putting yourself in position, like I said, in grocery, I'd work with the guys in the store, and then I would go sit in the boardroom with the P&L and kind of explain to them why they were missing out by just following numbers. And that's tough to do, right? You have the president of the company and some of the vice presidents, and you have to say to them, hey, we're really missing the boat, and this is why. But that kind of intel is valuable these days. You guys have that information. Pastry chefs are kind of humble in a way, right? Super competitive, compete most against ourselves, of course. Uh, and yet, once you get a lot of education and experiences, I talk to people who have a ton of experience and a wealth of knowledge and have been working maybe 7, 8, 10 years in the pastry field, and they don't feel like it. And my theory, I don't exactly know why, it's probably different for everybody, but my theory is it's because it's such a deep field and we're always learning and learning, that you never feel like you get enough. But if you were to look back on the person who wanted to be where you were, it's important for your identity work too. If you wanted to think back on that person who wanted to be where you are now, and then now you're here, I mean, you made it, right? What would that person say, right? They would be pretty impressed. Like, that person knows a lot. So feel the confidence. And in our pivots and the things we decide, let's say we kind of have a side hustle, have a online business we started. We got laid off, started an online business. We had a consulting business. We had been doing 2, 3 things, but we always feel like, but I need to have my hotel job. I need to work in restaurants because that's what's coolest. Again, kind of put that aside for now. Think about that when you do your identity work, but think that it's not a lack of resources, but a lack of resourcefulness that will choose, I will choose if I'm going to be successful or not. So again, it's not a lack of resources, but a lack of resourcefulness. So if you want to go do something, you should do it. You should put yourself in that direction. If you continue to tell yourself, well, I need X amount of funding, the market conditions aren't right, or we just had a pandemic and no one's going to buy, I can tell you firsthand, guys, there are many people doing well right now. It's hard to believe sometimes, But there are many people right now who, because of their chosen business, worked out really well. Perhaps, um, perhaps they did do something by accident, and they happened in a business that's all grab and go, or they happen to have a window that they can sell food out of. But hey, if that's working for them now, let's include that in our businesses. We don't have to wait. There are many, many pizzerias all over the country, right? That really never stops anyone. You see new ones all the time. Hasn't prevented people from starting new pizza businesses. The fact that there's a lot of them kind of proves that it's a space where people want to go. People will always eat the muffins and the cookies and the daily baked goods. So there's room for more of them, and there's room for your version of those. So, and so look at that as you do your work, and kind of work book activities are some things that there'll be more now. So be patient with me. We're going to kind of look at those, and in those activities, let's go back to page 5, if you would, with the pastry chef identity, and I'll let you look at this unencumbered by my visual there, and I can drink a little coffee and talk to you, drink a little tea. Pastry chef identity. So again, I'm going to write into this. Please do the writing. It's important. Among our important beliefs that we hold, who we are as people and as pastry chefs, right? We've got enormous capability. Like I told you, the guys are the most capable people on the planet, if it were up to me. And the power to tap into that potential comes from how we define ourselves. So, what was our old story that we kept telling ourselves? What did we say that defined us? I can only do this. I don't have enough money. And then the new story is, this is what I want to do. We did that blank plate visualization. So, when you do that activity after, maybe draw in what you saw, something new and different for yourself. And then the elements of style for a pastry chef. The elements of style, that's important. I think I'll pop back on here. You can write down the elements of style, and you should be really broad with those. So maybe just write down where you're at right now. Elements of style: heavy chocolate, love spice, love cooking with ingredients from all over the world, love to serve a certain community, love to connect with people. What's the elements of your style, your presentation style, whether you work for yourself or you work for someone else in that business? What are the elements of that style? And we looked at that career path. If you think about it here, look at some of this. So, unemployment kind of hover around 10% sometimes during all this. That means 88% of Americans are still working, right? And everyone, whether we want to or not, is still spending. So I don't want you guys to let fear get in the way of what we know we want to do, of getting in the way of having the blessing to get up every morning and do the things that we're lucky to do and do more of it, instead of thinking, oh, I have to be stuck here. They've cut for a lot of us, businesses have cut wages in half. There've been massive layoffs. So keep in mind there's been difficult periods in every era, and that we don't have to let that fear prevent us. In fact, if anything, if you have that fear, I mean, I'm human too. Like, I have those moments where I'm like, what did I do? How am I going to do this or that? And you just have to say, stop. That's my old story. I'm moving forward. Yeah, that's just a condition that everybody's dealing with, and I'm no different. But because I have that focus, because I put down my why, and I put in those activities that I'm moving toward and that I'm emanating toward, that I'll be able to get there. When you work from that space, you're going to see some success. So, continuing on with the workbook, to share your story, what's that excitement that led you to become a pastry chef? Was that one moment or one job or person? And what major accomplishment have you accomplished already? And are you still in love with pastry? Or what would make you still in love with pastry? And what would make you just so excited to do and have that work into your why? The new ideas, new methods. What are 3 new ideas you had while we were talking? Maybe write them down now while they're fresh in your mind. Just something, we're talking about some things you stepped away from your life and you kind of had some ideas. Kind of look at that. Maybe something come up. Maybe you had a little inspiration. And then moving away from past methods, what are three methods to combine to get a new outcome? What do you think three methods would be? This is something, if you can't think of, we can go over on the call. What's a methodology? We talked about visualization. That's one. Visualization is a methodology. What other methodologies can help us get to where we're going? Is it a routine that I have every day? I want to write a cookbook, so I'm going to have a methodology of wake up, do my job, come home, make some coffee, and immediately spend 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1 to 3 hours working on that, working on my business. Is scheduling a methodology that I can use? Is mentorship and go out and get further mentoring? Is that a way? So what what are some of those things? And then new desserts, we talk about briefly in the visualization a to-go container, grab and go. These initially, I mean, as a restaurant chef, I hated to go creme brulees, right? Gelato, it melts everywhere. Putting four sauces in like ramekins to go. What are they going to do with that at home? Dip into it. But people want those things, and we provided it. But what's a way we could design something for travel or for a grab and go? I mean, here in Chicago, we have a brand of corner stores that's sort of a bougie corner store, really cool, small, curated wine selection, fun frozen foods that maybe appeal to whoever might be up late at night. White Castle frozen burgers, frozen pizza, some local coffee beans you could buy, some gelato, pastry from the local bakery. That's a cornerstone. It's sort of like the high end 7-Eleven, and they're doing great right now. Now they were around in 2018, 2019, but now that everybody is considering shopping more, and sometimes you have to wait in line to go to a store now, right? It's a little bit spaced out. Can't run in anymore and just grab a loaf of bread or a couple things, cake and ice cream, of course. But here, designing those sort of things may help you get into places that you need to be right now. So rather than having, I have an aversion to go containers, but kind of embracing that as just another platform, just another plate. See if you could come up with something really innovative with that one. That's something that's important. So in terms of completing all this and wrapping it up for today and getting into the week and getting ready for session two, let's review a little bit. You're going to take, and I've got mine here, you take this trajectory map, the simple one, and you're going to fill out your why and some of the projects you see I have here around. And those are the important things. You're going to fill out whatever you can from the workbook. Again, I think first impressions are good, or right after this, right after you view it, write it down. What comes to mind is usually very valuable. And then what comes to mind later has a secondary value, a different value. Can do those things. I think it will definitely help you out. For for me, this has been a pleasure to just be able to give you this information. I know this is just the start, and I dropped some heavy things, some not so heavy things, but this is sort of the beginning of it. Take it from me. If you do follow along for the next 4 weeks, almost 5 weeks, you'll see results. So remember, book your calls. Wait, do your homework, book your calls, be ready for the call. I'll give you all my attention. One thing I think is important in life and in our careers is to always give your best stuff. So no matter what I'm doing, I will take the time to help you guys with what you need. So everybody's going to have a different need, right? You're all at different places. If you need a resource in food science, I'm going to bring that for you. If you need a resource in terms of how could you look for more work, depending on where you live, I'm going to bring that in for you. But overall, I'm confident if you can get your why straight, if you can expand your identity, and expansion for me means knowledge, means learning, right? If you can expand your identity a bit, you're going to see the result. You're going to really be happy with what you see and where you end up. And, those fears will start to melt away because you'll be too excited focusing on those things. And so for that reason, it's been my pleasure to serve you guys and introduce this to you. Again, excited for what's to follow. I will see you next week. If you have any questions, I'll stay on in the chat. You can chat for a little bit. And then moving forward, 15 minutes ahead of time, about 9:45, the chat will go live. So if you have some quick questions before and after each session, we can pick it up. Again, thank you. Be well and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.